Welcome to the Marvelous Middle Age Podcast, where we are building a community of people who are in the midst of midlife, sharing our stories and learning from each other along the way. Each week, I'll have a guest join me to discuss a topic that impacts our lives and touches on some aspect of midlife. We'll discuss relationships, transitions, health and well-being, parenting, careers, and more. My goal is to encourage and support you and help you thrive as you navigate this adventure of midlife. Join me here each week for the Marvelous Middle Age Podcast. This week, I'm speaking with Kathy Good, Senior Director of the Chris and Suzy DeWolf Family Innovation Center for Aging and Dementia. Kathy is a social worker by trade, but was instrumental in the creation and development of the Family Caregivers Center and the Family Innovation Center. She was the primary caregiver for her husband, Dave, beginning in 2003 when he was diagnosed with the visual variant of Alzheimer's. In this episode, Kathy shares her caregiving journey and how the Family Innovation Center came into existence. She shares about all of the programs, services, and resources that are available at the center. Please visit the links in the show notes for more details on how you can connect with someone at the Family Innovation Center to discuss your caregiving situation. Kathy Good, welcome to the Marvelous Middle Age Podcast.
Thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm delighted.
Well, I'm delighted too. We were talking before we pushed the record button, and I think we could probably talk about this topic all day. This episode will be the first in a series of episodes focused on caregiving, specifically for older adults. But if you're caregiving for maybe an adult child or someone else, a lot of this will probably apply, but it's really focused on aging adults primarily. And I'm thrilled that you're here. But before we get into all the good stuff, no pun intended, with your last name, could you introduce yourself to the listeners? Tell them about yourself, your background. That would be great.
Well, I'm an Iowa native, and I grew up in Boone, Iowa, in the central part of the state. And following high school, I went to Boone Junior College before it became a part of the Des Moines Area Community College. Then I transferred to the University of Iowa, where I was a journalism major until I changed my major to social work in my senior year, which is unheard of, but it all worked for me.
I love that.
And then I had an interesting experience in the summer between my junior and senior year of college at the what was then called the Boone Welfare Department. So as a result, I became known as the star social work trainee, and the State Department of now called Human Services, or whatever they're called now, said that the star social work trainee always went to graduate school. So I was given a stipend and was enrolled and went to the University of Iowa School of Social Work and earned my master's degree. And so following that, I came here to Cedar Rapids to what is now the Lynn County Child Development Center, and I was the first social worker. Followed that with early childhood programs at what was the Joint County School System, and then created the school social work program, and then went into private practice, and then coordinated the human service program at Kirkwood, and then took early retirement thinking I would just enhance my private practice. And then that's when my husband, Dave, was diagnosed with the visual variant of Alzheimer's. This was in 2003, and he was 56 at the time. So I kept my private practice small, ended up then retiring from my private practice at the end of 2013, and the journey towards establishing the Family Caregivers Center started in April of 2014.
Yes. And we are going to talk about that because I was not aware of that journey until I read your book. And wow, what a journey that had to have been and continues to be as the center is operating today. So I definitely want us to get into that here in a minute. Thank you for that. And we are also going to talk more about your journey with your husband and that sort of thing. I was just passionate about doing a series on caregiving because it's just something personally, it's touched my life and so many other people that I know. And I went on the website for the Family Caregivers Center and was tooling around that and thought, oh my gosh, what a great resource for our community. And I thought, I am going to just send an email and just see if someone might want to talk to me on the podcast. And you very graciously reached out. I had an opportunity to meet you and talk more about this. We kind of brainstormed some thoughts about what a series could look like. And then I went and toured the center, which is just phenomenal. If you live in Eastern Iowa and you have not visited the Chris and Suzy DeWolf Family Innovation Center for Aging and Dementia, and you are caring for someone who's older or who is experiencing dementia, you need to check it out. It is phenomenal. And again, we'll talk about all of this, but just the way it's designed, you talked to me about the colors that were chosen, all the elements that are there. I was blown away. And so thank you for just responding to my email saying, please, I'd love to speak with you, but also just being so gracious with your time and all the resources that you gave to me. And I'm excited for us to go on this journey for this series, because I think it's caregiving is just not, I think, a topic that we talk enough about, and its impact on the caregivers and families and the communities and the care receivers and all the different pieces, the layered, complex nature of it. So I'm excited for us to go on this journey together and talk more about it and let people know they're not alone and all of those things. So
it's my pleasure to be here and to initiate this with you.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yes, I'm so excited. So in this series, we will be talking about caregiving, again, specifically for aging people. For some, it might be a spouse or partner, a parent, or other family members that you might be caring for. We're going to talk generally about caregiving and how caregivers can take care of themselves while caregiving so that they can thrive during caregiving, and some resources. We'll touch on some resources. But I guess first of all, can you share about your caregiving journey and how it led to the work that you're doing now? I know I'm going to link to the Family Caregivers webpage and how you can get a copy of Kathy's book, because it's phenomenal. So well done and just beautifully written. But can you just talk about your own journey and how it led to the work that you're doing now? I just love for you to share about your husband and talk about your caregiving journey.
Sure. So my caregiving journey began in 2003 when Dave was diagnosed with the visual variant of Alzheimer's, and he was a judge at the time. And there were things that happened prior to that. And we were talking about this earlier before we pushed the record button. But I considered the things that I went like, as sort of blips. And then once he was diagnosed, I could see, there was a pattern there that he was really exhibiting that I just it didn't fit. And so it never occurred to me that he could be diagnosed with dementia. Plus, then, this was the visual variant of Alzheimer's, so a lot of his symptoms were visual in nature, and so he was having trouble reading the computer screen, so he got computer glasses. Then that didn't really help, and then it was sort of like, they thought he had cataracts, so he had his cataracts removed, and that didn't really help. And then he was a very active guy, and so he would come home and run on the news or on the noon hour. And so one Friday he came home and running and came back and said, Kathy, I can't go back to work. I don't know what is wrong with me, but I cannot do this. And so I called the Wolf Clinic that we'd been dealing with. And I said, there is something wrong, because what I'd done is I'd handed him a newspaper. And I said, read to me, because I knew he was having some visual issues. And he read the first line in a column, dropped off the last word, couldn't figure out where to pick it up. And I'm going like, oh my goodness, this is a guy that went through law school. So we went right down to the Wolf Clinic, and they determined that he didn't have much field of vision in either the lower quadrants of both eyes. And they're all kind of looking at each other and said, you really need to see a neuro-ophthalmologist at the U, Dr. Lee, but we probably won't be able to get you in. But it was amazing. This was a Friday afternoon, and Dr. Lee had an opening on Monday morning at 8 o'clock and diagnosed at STAT. So that really started the caregiving journey. And so, of course, in the beginning, because Dave was still capable of doing all kinds of things, I mean, he drove down to the university.
Wow. As he's driving there to be diagnosed with.
But he never drove again because they suggested that he not drive because this was the visual variant. And some of the blips that I noticed were kind of like crazy things that I just sort of, didn't pay attention to. So that really started the journey, but he could be independent for a very long time. And so I would have called myself a care partner at that point. But as his condition progressed and he needed more and more care on a more daily basis, then I considered that I was a caregiver.
Yes.
And so when he was at home and needing resources, then I would figure out in our community where resources existed, how you access them, how you put them together. And I used to say that I was running my committee. And so I used to wonder, what do people do who don't have decades of experience as a social worker in the community? How in the heck did they ever figure out how to do all of this? And the other thing that we were fortunate about was we had some financial resources. And so I used to wonder, like, how in the heck do people deal if they don't have financial resources? And so I went along until in April of 2014, after Dave had gone to live at Hallmar in 2011. So I kind of had an acquaintance with Tim Charles, who was the president and CEO of Mercy. And he kind of knew me several ways. One, his wife and I were on the local Alzheimer's chapter board together. And then when Dave went to Hallmar, I thought they had crappy art. And so I suggested that they needed good art because those people were there 365 days a year. And people like me were there also. And so we needed good art. And hospital said, well, they didn't know if they had any money. So once I raised $6,000, they said, well, maybe they had $5,000. And then we asked for art from some of the residents that were there. And so Mary Suze, who owned the Corner House Gallery at the time, donated framing and matting. And so we refreshed those pieces of art. So we were able to put 103 pieces of lovely art on the walls of the 2 floors of Hallmar. And so I think Tim Charles came to know that I could do something from nothing.
You bet. He saw you and said, I need to talk to this woman.
And he also knew that I retired from my clinical practice at the end of 2013. So in April of 2014, he asked me if I had any interest in helping the hospital explore the possibility of starting a Family Caregivers Center. It was like, bingo, yes, there is the answer to my question of what do people do? Okay, well, we can help caregivers figure out what their needs are, how they can get connected with community resources if they don't have any money. Well, fine, we'll figure that all out.
Right.
And so he was particularly concerned at the time about the number of people that were going to be diagnosed with dementia and feeling as though the medical community was not prepared to deal with that. And so thought that if we had a Family Caregiver Center, at least we could support family caregivers who were caring for somebody living with dementia. But we also could provide support to caregivers caring for adults with other kinds of chronic conditions. So that started the process.
Wow.
that now has resulted in the Chris and Suzy DeWolf Family Innovation Center for Aging and Dementia 10 years later.
That, I was reading your book and you very articulately chronicle what was probably a lot more than what went into the you did a great job of succinctly explaining how all of that came to be. And I just couldn't help but think what providence that was, that you were the perfect person to begin this process and all that went into it. It wasn't like all of a sudden you just said, oh, let's do this. There was research and tireless hours and months and year and, all of these things that went into putting this together. And it was, you looked at other places that you thought, well, would it look like this? Or maybe, no, it should look more like this over here. It was just incredible, the amount of, work that, again, probably just felt like a labor of love in a way to make that happen. So I was just blown away reading those pages. It was just amazing. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I think that Mercy is to be commended for the fact that they sort of stuck their necks out, and were willing to do something innovative, entrepreneurial that they knew would meet a need. But at the time, people went, a caregiver center? Well, like, what's that? But we were able to put our story together well enough that then we were able to raise money to endow the center to make sure that it would be available for everybody. And the goal was $2.5 million, and in 16 months we raised $2.6 million. Wow. So, and I think it came about, first of all, we had a story, to tell. And then I think that so many people had already been touched by particularly dementia, but other kinds of chronic conditions too, and recognizing that the whole caregiving process is like nobody's there to really support the caregiver. And so people could relate to it, and I think that that's what initially made it easier to raise the money to endow the center so that then it would continue to exist.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I agree with everything that you said. I think, and that's one of the reasons, when I think about what I'm doing with this podcast, I feel there's so much power in storytelling and sharing our stories. Yeah. And you and many others have so courageously shared your story with caregiving, and that's very powerful. Whether you're just sharing it to provide community and validation to others, whether you're trying to raise money for something like the center, even just being out in the community and advocating for caregivers and their family members, it's so powerful when you have that personal perspective. And I'm sure this has probably happened. You share your story and all these people are like, oh, me too.
Yes, exactly.
I've either been through it myself or I'm going through it now.
Yes.
And that's huge. That's just very powerful. So yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your book is called My World Wore a Bowtie. And you talk about your husband, Dave, and very accomplished man. And you said very active, and you started to notice things that were going on with him. And we talked a little bit about this before we started recording, and how you were noticing some things with him that you kind of were like, oh, well, it's just this or it's that. And then, but looking back, you reflected that it was a part of a bigger picture for him. And again, that personal story, that sharing of that, I hope that those listening who are in the midst of this, what that's like to watch someone you care about deal with something like that. I also love the term you used called care partner, because I think the other thing that happens, and when I was touring the center, we talked about this a little bit, I think people very quickly dismiss folks who are aging. Even if you're aging with little to no chronic health issues, as we age, I feel like we become more invisible. And then if you do have something going on, dementia or a chronic health condition, I think that even happens to a further extent. And how, advocating for your husband and this, again, labor of love that this center turned into, how important that is for not just the caregivers and their loved ones, but for our community to know that people have value no matter what their age, no matter what they have going on. People with dementia are still vibrant, active community members who have lots to offer. And so here in a minute, I do want to talk more about the center because, and we can even start with that right now, because you have so much going on. You gave me excellent materials, and I'm going through the newsletters and the calendar of events. And I'm going to link all of this in the show notes so that folks listening to, and I'm going to link them in all the episodes, because I think it's important that people know about resources, and we'll talk more about some of that. But the center has a plethora of groups and resources. But tell us more about the center in terms of, you shared with me how it was designed, why it was designed the way that it was, and just some of the things going on at the center right now that are exciting.
Sure. Well, at the DeWolf Innovation Center, it really came about as a result of the success that we had experienced at the Family Caregivers Center. And it also came about as a result of a challenge from Chris and Suzy DeWolf, because in February of 2017, after the Caregiver Center had been in existence for how many months, 14 months or something. They wanted to know what else we needed. And I said, well, I didn't think the Caregiver Center need anything more, but I had this idea. And I said that, and of course they wanted to hear it. So I said, there's all of these services that Mercy has in place, and now the Family Caregiver Center, particularly as it relates to dementia, but there are some missing pieces. And one is that the Hallmark Residential Living Center really needed to be replaced because it was decades old, and structurally wise it was not so great. And so I said that needed to be replaced, and we also needed services for people living with earlier stage dementia because, well, we have Milestones Day Center in our community that they do an excellent job. People with early stage dementia need some activities but not there. And so anyway, Chris and Suzy said, go for it. So that set us on a journey. Tim, Charles, and I sort of interviewed CEOs of various places all across the country, ended up thinking that we needed to go visit Abe's Garden in Nashville, Tennessee. And so we all went down there, and because Abe's Garden was started by Abe's family, Abe was a physician who got dementia, was diagnosed with dementia, and his family couldn't find a place for him, so they created one. And it was a state of the art, and it was awesome. But on the way back, then Chris and Suzy said, well, that was really good, but we think you can do better, so how about Abe's Garden 2.0? And so that set us then on another course of action to say, I think we need to create a dementia center of excellence. And about that same time, Mercy Medical Center partnered with Presbyterian Homes and Services to create Hallmark Village. And so we were going to put the Dementia Center of Excellence within the village center there, 3 floors. And as we were drawing the blueprints, we'd already filled the space. And at the same time, serendipitously, we learned that Lydia Brown, a local realtor and on Mercy's Board of Trustees, let us know that the Echo Hill Presbyterian Church was for sale. And so another woman and I went out there and thought, we can turn this into a dementia center of excellence. But in the process, it had kind of morphed into the DeWolf Innovation Center because Chris and Suzy seeded that with $2 million. And so it was sort of like, it then became known as the Innovation Center. So it took us 18 months to redo the building, which now is a place, but it's much more than a place. We're looking to reframe how people look at aging and dementia. But it also is a place then that brings together a number of resources for people living with chronic conditions, particularly dementia, older adults. So it houses the Mercy Center for Memory Health, where if you have any concerns about your changing memory, you can go and they will help assess that and determine whether it is normal aging or whether it is a form of dementia. And then there is our second location of our Family Caregivers Center. So we work very closely with then people who are diagnosed. They're made aware of all of the services that are available through the Family Caregivers Center. And then because there still is a gap in terms of kind of social day programs for people living with early stage dementia, we've started a connections program that has a variety of aspects. One is every Thursday now we've started a program of activities for people living with earlier stage dementia that provides then, of course, respite for their caregiver. And we know that technology is with us and can be very helpful. And so we have a series of what we call kiosks that contain products and samples and assistive technology, and that is coupled with a age and dementia friendly smart showroom that has smart appliances and has examples donated by Grand Appliance locally, and also samples of furniture so that you can come and see what makes a chair a good sturdy chair, what makes a table so that you can lean on it and it doesn't tip when you get up. And so we'll be expanding. That's probably our least developed component of the Innovation Center, but it will become more robust as we gain more volunteer help to make that work. So all of that is going on at the Innovation Center. We've changed the sanctuary into a conference and a performance space, and so it is great for our Together in Song chorus that is composed of people living with chronic conditions, including dementia, their care partners if they wish to sing, and volunteer singers. We do 2 concerts a year. We have 2 seasons, so it houses that. And then we have had a couple of sisters who are now residing, Mercy sisters, who are residing at Hallmar have died, and we've had their funerals in the auditorium there. Plus, then we'll hold our 3rd annual DeWolf Center Innovation Forum this November, and so it can house about 150 people around tables. We can house 250 people in chairs, and so the first concert that we had at the DeWolf Innovation Center with the Together in Song chorus, we held up traffic on on C Avenue because
that's how you know it's good.
So
when you're
many
holding
people
up
were wanting to come. Exactly right.
Awesome.
So anyway, we've been using that space. So we're very fortunate. We have a number of conference spaces, but basically it's the configuration of the components that provide services to people all located in one spot that is very helpful.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I can speak to the center in terms of all of that because you very graciously gave me a tour. And I don't know what I was expecting when I came out there, but I was blown away. First of all, just the way it's designed and the color palette, and you can speak to that in just a little bit. It's dementia-friendly color palette design. The spaces that you have, the larger sanctuary space that you've turned into this large meeting space, but also for the chorus and other events there is phenomenal. Beautiful artwork. I believe it was Don Dixon. Yes. Gorgeous art in there. And then all the spaces for support groups, meetings, all the different events that go on out there. I was just blown away. There's a lending library out there. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the kiosk with the products and things. At first I walked in and I thought, what are all these? And I walked up and there's, signage there that explains what the item is, how to use it, what it's for. And those are all of those things. And there's so much more I'm not even mentioning that caregivers and their family members need to know about, and it's in one spot, and that is huge, right? Nobody has time to run around to 20 different places to do all these things, and when they can come out there, just the programming alone that you're doing is phenomenal. Let alone the spaces. When you took me into the space with the kitchen appliances and the furniture, things that you don't think about how important it is to have access to, whether it's certain types of furniture pieces, appliances in your kitchen, those kinds of things, just completely blew away any expectations that I had. It was amazing.
I would be remiss if I didn't go back to and say, through the Family Caregivers Center, I said it was connected and we work very collaboratively with the Center for Memory Health. However, any caregiver can call the Family Caregivers Center regardless of the chronic condition of the person that they're caring for, and we'll sit down and do a one-on-one meeting with them.
Yes.
So that we can help them identify what their needs are and what's important to them, and connect them with resources either at our center or in the community. Mm-hmm. And somebody can come as often as they want. as long as they want, and we're there for them, and this is a free service. So part of the reason for the endowment of the Family Caregivers Center is to ensure that these kinds of things are happening without, regardless of cost, regardless of whether somebody has the money to pay for those or not, because all caregivers feel alone and feel overwhelmed. And what our job is to hopefully make them feel less isolated and less overwhelmed by connecting them with resources. And we have, as you said, support groups, we have educational sessions, we have this lending library, and we're connected with all kinds of resources in the community, and we can help them navigate that process so that, because sometimes it's overwhelming as a caregiver to figure out, who do I call and what do I even say?
Right. What are the right questions to even ask? Where do I start?
Exactly. And so when we first started the Family Caregivers Center, the one that is still located down across from Mercy, I used to think that I should video the faces of people when the caregivers, when they would come in, because they'd be all stressed and like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know what this place is, and am I going to do this right? And then to video their face when they left, because they're relaxed, they're happy, they've liked being there. They know now that even if they don't have an immediate need, that we're going to be there when they do have a need, and we're available. So
I love that. Right. I can just imagine, it is overwhelming, even if you're blessed to live in a community that has lots of resources, which is, I don't know that that's the norm. I'm guessing there's a lot of communities that don't have access to great resources like we do here. Even if you do, it's overwhelming to know, what's my first step? Who do I call? Where do I go? Knowing people can come in, sit down with someone and say, and just kind of unload their situation and say, here's where I'm at. I don't know what to do. And having someone with the knowledge and the tools to help them start to navigate all of these things and know how to prioritize their needs and who to talk to, that, you're right. I mean, it probably is just a night and day difference for people when they come in.
It is. And I think that the provision of emotional support when you're dealing with something that is totally life-changing, when you become a caregiver for somebody, particularly spousal caregivers, but clearly if you're an adult child too, kind of dropped into that caregiving role, not knowing what to do, it is life-changing, and so having somebody that also provides not only resources, but emotional support. I used to say, because our staff and probably 99% of our volunteers, and we're very dependent upon our volunteers, they're all either current caregivers or former caregivers. So I used to say, we talk caregiver here.
Yeah. It's our own language.
Yeah,
we formulated our own language here.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's a lot of comfort in that too, because we've probably all been in situations where we've been looking for resources for something and the person, we can't relate to them or they can't relate to us. And to know you're sitting across from someone that most likely has been in a very, it's not a cookie cutter situation, obviously, but everybody's different, but someone who's been there and they've experienced probably a lot of similar emotions and thoughts and feelings to what you're going through. That validation alone sometimes can just be it's priceless. You can't.
Yes, exactly. We use a peer support model, which means that we're not a clinically based service. So that means that our volunteers and our staff share some of their personal experience, not with the thought that the caregiver who's coming into the center has to do what we've done, but to say, here's some ideas that have worked for us. And so it's a model that I think really fits the service that we're providing.
Absolutely. I do want to touch on your volunteers for just a minute, because you showed me a really fun, nice volunteer room that your volunteers and staff can use when they're there doing the groups and different things. And again, link will go in the show notes, but talk about your volunteers a little bit and just for a minute. And if someone was listening to this and they're like, gosh, I have been through this with my spouse, I'd love to come out and volunteer. How can they volunteer with you?
They just need to call us.
Okay, great.
And
pick up the phone and call.
That sets it in motion.
Okay.
Or you also can go to the Mercy website, and there is a volunteer application that you can fill out online, and you can just indicate that you might have interest in the Family Caregiver Center or the Innovation Center, and that application will get to us, and then we'll give you a call.
Okay.
And if somebody doesn't call you, then you call us.
Right. That sounds great.
But when we started, we had one paid employee, an office coordinator, and me.
Yeah.
And so, and I was a volunteer, and so I started recruiting other people who would be volunteers, and that's where we started. And so we would not have been able to make all of the progress that we've been able to make without our volunteers. So probably in the course of time that we've been working on the Caregiver Center and now the Innovation Center, we've probably had probably about 300 volunteers. Now that they're not all currently active, but currently we have about 130 active volunteers that are doing all kinds of things, from baking cookies, because one of our signatures is homemade cookies.
Ooh.
And so we have bakers, and
I love that.
We also have people who come and help stuff our fold and stuff our newsletter that goes out monthly, to people who are facilitating our groups, our support groups, our innovation series groups that are more educational in nature, although very supportive of their own. People who are doing clerical kinds of things for us. So we think that there's kind of room for everybody.
Yeah. Any role they would like.
And if somehow we don't think there's a fit at the Family Caregivers Center, then of course there are all these opportunities at Mercy Medical Center too.
Of course.
We have a whole range of activities, but we're very dependent upon our volunteers and try and nurture them, and have had great retention. We've had volunteers that have been with us since the beginning.
Wow, that's great. And I think that really speaks to the way things are done there, and the probably just the internal, fulfillment that they get, knowing that they're helping other caregivers and their family members through this journey. And it looked like when I was out there, they were having a really nice, I think maybe a group was either in the midst or wrapping up. They had a group, and everyone, there was just smiles, and everyone looked like they were having a great time. And so I think that's another thing too. You're going to come out there, and it's going to be, yes, as we all know, there's a lot of hard elements of being a caregiver, but there's also joy, and there's fun, and there's a lot of cool things going on out there that people can enjoy there. So
So as I left to come here this morning, the Master Gardeners, because we've partnered with the Master Gardeners, and I think there were 20 caregivers and the people that they care for there to do flower arranging.
Oh,
and so the Master
fun.
Gardeners bring in all of their fresh flowers and then talk about how you make arrangements, and then everybody makes arrangements and takes them home. So, and they also come in the wintertime, probably before Christmas, and do things so that you can put some basket of greens and bows and all that sort of thing on your porch. So, so we've partnered with a lot of different people to make things happen for caregivers, things that are fun and things that caregivers can do with the people that they're caring for too.
I love that. I love that because, again, it's fostering that community, that relationship, that they're there with other caregivers and their care receivers to create a little community, a little group, and support each other. And also while doing really fun things, like eating homemade cookies and making flower arrangements. I mean, how that would be so much fun. I love that. For those of us in middle age, we either are or will be caregiving for an aging person in our lifetime. Be sure to tune in next week for part 2 of my conversation with Kathy Good as we discuss the impact of caregiving on the nearly 48 million family caregivers in the United States. If you're enjoying the podcast, please follow the show to make sure the latest episode is on your podcast feed each week. I would greatly appreciate a rating and a 5-star review on the podcast platform you're listening on. It helps others to find the show. If there are topics you'd like me to discuss on the show, please email me at themarvelousmiddleagepodcast@gmail.com or direct message me on Instagram at Nicole Stute. Thank you for listening.